"Mr. Lewis, you're completely insane." When Jerry Lewis passed away, his sons finally spoke out. And what they revealed was more than just a truth. It was a chilling confession about the man the world had hailed as the king of comedy. In some circles, Jerry Lewis is still spoken of with reverence. They say if it hadn't been for him, modern comedy wouldn't exist in the way we know it. He was the one who walked first, stumbling in the dark, bloodying his nose so that others could one day run free. But behind the fame, behind the spotlight and the infectious laughter, there was another story. Not one of success, but of struggle. Not one of recognition, but of a desperate need to be heard. He was born on March 16, 1926, to Jewish immigrants. His father, Danny Levitch, had once left the vast lands of the Russian Empire. His mother, Rachel, came from Warsaw. They both carried the soul of performance within them. He was a vaudeville entertainer, she a pianist with a delicate touch. In their home, comedy and music were not just pastimes. They were air. Little Jerry grew up surrounded by faded theater posters and the sound of piano keys. Early on, he realized that making people laugh was more than an act. It was a way to survive. His humor wasn't just sharp, it was wild, unpredictable, like a sudden gust of wind. As a teenager, he would interrupt classes with pranks, always teetering between punishment and applause, chaos and brilliance. The first act he ever created was more of a child's game than a performance. Jerry would pretend to sing while a phonograph played behind the curtain. It was a kind of hymn to make believe, a comedic illusion pushed to its limits. The audience didn't always get it, but he couldn't stop. By the age of 15, he was already performing in Buffalo. Felt like a beginning, but it ended in disappointment. Tickets didn't sell, the show didn't land. The dream, still so fragile, seemed to freeze in midair before it could unfold. Crushed, he stepped away from the stage. For a while, he did whatever jobs he could find. Selling soda, working as an usher in New York movie theaters. He stood in the dark, watching others shine under the stage lights, perhaps wondering whether his calling had been real after all. And yet, as it often happens with those whose inner fire refuses to die, one day, he met someone from the past. A friend of his father's, an old performer. And from somewhere deep within, from childhood memories, from worn-out records, from the sound of his mother's applause at the piano, the longing returned. The urge to step back into the light sparked once more. Everything changed the day Max Coleman walked back into Jerry's life. An old friend who seemed to know exactly how to pull Lewis out of the quicksand of his misfortunes. Max saw something in Jerry that even Jerry himself had almost lost. A spark. He convinced him to give the stage another try. And so, with doubt in his heart but hope in his eyes, Jerry returned to what he knew best, performing. He started small, touring the Borscht Belt, a string of summer resorts nestled in New York's Catskill Mountains, popular among Jewish vacationers. It was there that Irving Kay, a sharp-eyed promoter, noticed Jerry. Kay would soon become his first real manager. At the time, the Second World War was at its height. Young men were enlisting in droves, answering the call of duty. But Jerry's fate took a different turn. A heart condition made him ineligible for military service. Strangely enough, that rejection marked the beginning of a new chapter. Around this time, he met Patty Palmer, a singer whose voice struck a chord in more ways than one. Their connection was immediate and deep, and by October of 1944, they were married. They built a family together, adopting one son and welcoming 5 more children. In photographs, they looked like the perfect American dream. But behind the scenes, the picture was far from flawless. At 19, Jerry was performing at the Glass Hat Club in New York City. He didn't yet know that a young 27-year-old crooner named Dean Martin was also singing there. For a while, they remained nothing more than 2 entertainers crossing paths, their destinies running parallel, not yet touching. It would take a few more years before fate brought them together for real. That moment came at the 500 Club in Atlantic City, sparked by pure chance. One night, an act canceled unexpectedly, leaving the club in a bind. Jerry, never one to back down, suggested a replacement no one would have expected, Dean Martin. No one could have imagined what would follow. At first, truth be told, they were terrible. So bad, in fact, that Skinny D'Amato, the club owner, threatened to pull them off stage unless they stepped up their game. Martin and Lewis stood at a crossroads. Figure it out or fizzle out. It was at that breaking point that the magic happened. They threw away the script, abandoned rehearsals, and began to improvise. Jerry would crash Dean's songs, interrupt him, mimic him, turn everything upside down, and the crowd couldn't stop laughing. It was raw, spontaneous, and electric comedy born in the moment, from the explosive chemistry of two wildly different, but perfectly matched, performers. That night, a legend was born. From the 500 Club, they stormed up the East Coast, drawing crowds wherever they went. Their grand finale came at the iconic Copacabana in New York City, where their shows sold out night after night. Then, in 1948, television took notice. NBC brought the duo onto the small screen. And just like that, the world knew. Something extraordinary had arrived. Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin, two men whose onstage magic was real, irresistible, and unforgettable. It was a time when neon-lit hope flickered from the television screens and radio sets served as windows to another world. A world where laughter was currency and charisma was a ticket to immortality. In that world, pulsing with vaudeville shadows, catchy jingles, and canned laughter, a phenomenon was born. Its name, Martin and Lewis. By the mid-1940s, they had already secured their place on the airwaves. Their radio show ran until 1953, drawing millions of listeners to their living rooms. Just as Ed Sullivan was launching his now legendary toast of the town, he invited the duo to appear on his very first broadcast. Their presence stole the show, and it wasn't long before they became regular guests on a growing number of television programs. Everything they touched seemed to turn to gold. But television was a fickle muse.